Hey, um, so before I get started with the actual tutorial part, I thought I would start off with a rundown of how my brushes work because I use specific brushes for everything. Um, so the ones that I use in shading the most are these two. Uh, this one is a really good semi-transparent blocking brush, um, and it acts as a bit of a blender too. Um, and this one is like a similar thing to this one, but it doesn't blend as much, and it's got a nice texture to it. Um, the pen is pretty solid. It doesn't have any blending, and it's just a pen. It's good for blocking a lot of solid colors. I tend to use it more for laying down flats than I use it for shading, but occasionally I'll use it for little tiny details because it's really good for that. The smudge tool is primarily used to blend two colors together. It's got some nice features where it will you can get either a soft blur or a hard edge, but it does also lay down color. So if I press really hard, it will start to draw, which is handy if I don't want to switch brushes. The soft brush is just a really light airbrush. It doesn't really do color blending, but it does at the same time. Like, it's not actively blending the colors together, but it can blend them. And the blur kind of acts as an airbrush. So I don't use it much because I don't tend to need a really soft edge on things, but if I want to make it look hazy, it's good for that. So that's the brushes I use. When I start doing this kind of thing, I tend to do a layered effect. So when I start off with the flats, I typically will do an overlay layer first that will make it more atmospheric. And then from there, I'll do a sketchy look of using the shade brush. I'll go around and mark out where I want to do the lighting, like the main direction. And then I'll go through and really detail it, as you can see in this panel. Is that I'll go through and refine it, and I'll show you how I do that. And then after that, I'll go through and add in some very minor shading, like really just to push the areas that I didn't add light to. Another thing is that I don't do it on the layers. I do it in a completely different folder. My flats are all separate. I'm not doing anything to them, so it makes it easier to go through and do any edits that I need to do. Like if I mess up somewhere on the shading, then I can easily just go through and fix it. And it also makes it easier to do tests like this, where I can check the directions of the lighting, and where it's hitting and where I need to fix. I don't do this kind of check very often if I'm fairly certain that I'm keeping my directions in check. But I always make sure that when I'm shading, I keep a solid direction for where the light's coming from. Like, with this one, I went through and I did a bunch of sketching where it's like, so because the window here, is a main light source, and then there's also, a laptop in front of him, I literally just did this. I doodled where the primary light source was, and then where the soft light source was. And I used like different shapes and the word's escaping me. But yeah, once I've got the doodles in place, I would go through on a separate layer and mark out where the light sources would be primarily hitting. So, like, for this one, the window light is mostly hitting here. I'll do this in a different color. The window is mostly hitting on this side, so you would see a lot more of the lighting, like passing through and like hitting little areas like this. But once it gets into this zone, the main light source isn't really going to be hitting it, but you would still see a little bit of the rim light because it's like it's behind him. So you'd see a little bit of it on this side, but not very much. You'd see it in areas that would be facing towards it. And then for the laptop, I basically made it so the viewer was the light source. So anything you'd be immediately hitting is lit up, and then stuff that's facing away from you would be darker. So there's not very much of the laptop lighting past like this region. And then there's also areas that are just directly being blocked, like these. So once I've got it marked out where I want the shading to go, I'll utilize having everything segmented into different layers like this, to help me, like, it basically keep divisions clean while still keeping the lighting above everything else. And usually I start with hair or skin, so I'll select it, just like control click the layer and it'll select everything on it. And then I'll hide the selection, but it'll still be there. And I'll go through and neaten up the areas that I want to be lighter, like the spots that are being hit more by the light. And this part takes a little while. It's getting textures and roughing out the areas that are hit and not hit by the light. I tend to use lighting to create shadows rather than adding shadows myself. So like on this one, I don't really need very much actual shading because the lighting does most of the work for me. Like, this is all that there is for the shading on this one. It's really light. Most of it comes from the actual light itself. I don't know, I find it easier to keep track of everything this way. But yeah, it's just a bunch of going through, neatening things up, and doing. I don't do any blurring until after I've got everything laid out where I want it to be. And I don't do very much blurring. I more use it to get rid of little imperfections that would take ages to erase. But I tend to do a lot of texturing through the shading, so I try not to get rid of all of it. It's more just to help keep the lighting smooth and consistent. And depending on the detail level I want in the piece, I'll keep going back over it and adding more and more detail, but I do it in stages, so it's not like I'm not focusing too much on any one portion of the art. It's more an overall focus on everything that slowly gets more detailed as the need for it arises. So, like, once I've got it mostly blocked out, I'll start doing little, basically carving it. I think for this one, I figured out where I wanted the pearls to lie, so it's like getting the directions down first and then going through and making it look a little bit more like hair rather than random spaghetti. Also, if it starts looking too bright, that's when I tend to use the soft brush as an eraser. So if it starts looking too oversaturated with the light, I'll use it to tone it back without having to adjust the opacity. It helps give you more variety in tones as well. I use the feature inside where you can turn your brush into an eraser quite a lot. It just makes the process a lot easier. Like I actually thought about completely deleting my normal eraser because I don't really use it, but it is helpful in some circumstances, so I keep it around. Okay. You know what? I don't like how that section looks in general, so I'm just gonna redo it. I suppose I should also try and match the curls in the other image too. That'd be helpful. Okay. Also, don't be afraid to change your line art. It's not set in stone. I had to teach myself that. And after having finally gotten that stuck in my head, it's been very helpful. So, if your line art starts looking kind of gross when you're shading, don't be afraid to change it. It's not going to be perfect the first time, I guarantee it, so just be willing to change it up. I always try and follow the curves that I set up in my line art, so if the curves aren't working, I change them. Like that looks a lot better than what I had going on before. So I'll just go in and fix up the lines. Go through and, like I said, just use the smudge tool to more neaten up any fuzzy weirdness than actually try and blur stuff out, because the brushes I use tend to do that for themselves. I don't really need to blur anything out, it's more just to help tidy it. And because I'm thinking this looks pretty good, I'll just make a couple last tiny detail adjustments. Basically spots that would be hit the most by the light, because I'm not going to be doing another pass of the soft erase. So just tiny bits of highlight in spots that are facing towards the source a little more than others. And this is the spot where I would go through and actually use the smudge brush to blur it together, because it's not going to be blurred by the rest of the process. So I kind of have to do this bit manually. I only put shading in the spots that aren't being which is why I tend to do the lighting first, because it helps me visualize where the light isn't hitting. So it's a lot easier to know where to put the little bits of shading that I do. So it's basically just pushing the contrast of the image a little more. I'm not going to be putting nearly as much detail into this shading as I do with my normal pieces, but I figured this is going to be a lot more approachable than the hyper detailed stuff that I usually do. But if you are interested in doing that, then that's where I tend to use my chibi brush and the pen for really fine details. But I tend to only use the pen tool as a final touches thing. I don't use it very often in shading. And of course, different textures will have different, different materials will have different textures, so the light will affect them in a unique way. Also, because this is going to be a less detailed overall thing, I'm not going to go through and do little details like the flyaways and the little bits where the fur is catching more light than others. So usually I'll do that to show extra texture, like through highlights, and I actually don't tend to do any textures through shading. I only do that through highlights. Because it doesn't really make sense to have shading show extra textures. Because it's the absence of light, and when you don't have any light, you can't see anything's texture. But if I were to, just as a demonstration, if I were to add extra texturing, I would probably do like little flyaways with the pen. And this is where I would use the pen, just to go through and add tiny details, like flyaway hairs, which I would actually do with a lighter color, because they're catching a lot more direct light than everything else, and like extra shines, like with this piece, because he had just finished crying, I added an extra shine on the lower part of the eye and a little bit right here. But the rest of the detailing I did through the shading. And that's about it, aside from showing how to do different textures. Like the satiny kind of look of the Joker and the cotton t-shirt. There's a lot of different things to keep track of, but I think I'd want to do a part 2 for that, so that I can go through and describe how to do everything in that more depth. So, bye for now. Have a nice day.